You are listening to the Gritty Podcast, where we talk about all things gritty. Last year, we did a couple of seminar events that were like 2.5, 3-day weekend events. We're doing those again this year. We're going to 4 different Shields locations, and we're going to do a seminar. Myself, Ryan Lampers, and Mark Livesay. One of them is a bear tour event. And
Boise, Idaho.
The other 3 are elk related. Yep. So if you want to come to those events, they're in 4 different states.
Idaho, Montana, Colorado, and Texas.
There you go. To learn about it, we're calling it the Peaks Tour. Go to treelineacademy.net. Go over there, look up the Peaks Tour information there. You can sign up, come join us. Like I said, it's myself, Ryan Lampers, Mark Livesay. We're going to be at each of those events. Come, learn, and ask us questions. It was a hit last year when we did it, so I think you're going to enjoy this one. It's a fun multi-day event, and hope to see you there. Go to treelineacademy.net and look up the Peaks Tour. Welcome to the Gritty Podcast. I'm Brian Call. I've got Brad Hunt here today. We're going to finish our discussion, resume our discussion on wolf hunting and wolves and their impact on the environment and all that kind of stuff. We covered wolves in the impact of wolves on
the economic impact on ranching / farming.
Yeah. It was interesting discussion. It was kind of eye-opening as I did more research. There's a lot of costs that are sort of overlooked by the wider public when they think of wolves and their impact on ranching. So we broke that down in the last episode. Check it out if you haven't heard that. But today's discussion is centered more on hunting and wildlife and the impact that wolves have on both a real world impact that wolves have on the food supply,
right,
for humans,
wildlife supply,
and the economic impact that a state experiences. The whole point of this discussion is to bring to the forefront in people's minds that wolves on the landscape comes at a cost. Yep. It's not like it's just free. Like, oh, now we're in utopia. We have wolves and everything's good now and everything's balanced. It's not what happens. It's not real life. So we're going to break it down, starting with this idea. Okay. I think I had Shane Mahoney on the podcast years ago, conservationist. He was working on some initiatives. They had done some research. I think the RMEF, Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation, has published some of this data as well. There was an estimate of something like 330 million pounds or 350 million pounds. I don't remember the exact number.
I think it was 330 million pounds.
This was like
meat
2 decades ago or something, but 10 years ago at least. But 330 million pounds of venison consumed per year by hunters. Okay, let's just take that number for example. I don't know how much of that is elk, moose, deer, or if it even includes them at all. But let's just say, suffice it to say, 330 million pounds of meat, protein, is consumed. Let's just throw a number out there for today's use. Okay, that's a lot of meat that hunters go out and buy a tag and a license, weapons, bows, practice. They
ammo that's real cheap nowadays.
And you got to have a side by side and a trailer, and a horse maybe. And, like, there's things hunters spend money on to be able to go out and get their own, get their meat from the wild, and that right there, 330 million pounds of it is being consumed annually by hunters. Now that's a resource. That is a thing that is contributing to the nutrition and, the food supply for the human population on this in America.
Yeah.
So if you're going to introduce wolves and they're going to decrease that resource, what's the cost?
Right. How are you going to replace it?
And what's the cost? Part of that cost is replacing it with something else, right? What's that cost? So let's break that down. Let's just say this is rough. This is just for an analogy. Let's say you have 330 million pounds of meat and you're going to feed half of that to an unchecked wolf population. Like and we know from historical data that there are areas where the elk populations have gone down by 60, 70%, sometimes 80%, sometimes wiped them out completely.
Right.
Moose as well, deer, okay, caribou. There's some herds that are just gone now that used to be in Idaho that are gone.
Right. They're no longer there.
So, and it wasn't just wolves that contributed to that, but wolves were the death knell. Okay, so let's say 330, half of that, let's say, 150 million pounds of meat is now decreased due to wolves. This is just a rough deal. 150 million pounds, and then let's say a cow is 600 to 800 pounds of meat.
Most of your ranchers are getting between 750 to like 1,000 pounds of meat per cattle.
So let's say 800 pounds,
800
somewhere
pounds
in there.
Pretty good estimate.
And 800 pounds of beef.
Yep.
Is
so you need 412,500 beef to replace that 330 million pounds of venison.
The wolves wouldn't eat all of it.
Correct. Now that is as a whole. But
so we are also talking about
cut that in half. You need to have 206,000.
Yeah, 200,000 cattle you need to put on the landscape, which is about 500,000 acres that you need. To raise them.
It's usually a minimum of cow-calf ratio is 1 to 1.5 acres per cow-calf.
Right. And what we're talking about, 330 million, is whitetails. I'm curious how many elk and deer. I don't really have the stats for how much meat is consumed through moose, deer, all these species affected by the reintroduction of wolves into the space. Hey everybody, if you like the show and you want to support us, head on over to Mountain Ops. If you're in need of a new merino hoodie, or you want some workout clothes, or you just want a little pick-me-up. I like the Mountain Ops Ignite, especially like the pink lemonade flavor. It's a good one. I recommend that. Head on over to Mountain Ops, use the code GRIDDY. You're going to save, and it's going to help us keep bringing you the show. Thanks for tuning in. Now, let's get back to the show. They have, though, depleted dramatically in some regions the number of animals that's currently available. And left unchecked and unhunted and untrapped, those herd numbers would go way down.
Right.
Way down. Wolves hunt 365 days a year, not just the month of September. Wolves, just like we talked about in the last podcast, they impact the weight and the health. And there's a lot of other factors besides predation, just in the quality of the herd and its survival through the winter.
Right.
Get a hard winter with a lot of elk not grazing on prime lands anymore because they hold to these cliffs and ledges where their feed is sparse, but they won't get killed. Now you're starting to really have a rapid decrease in population levels due to the presence of wolves on the landscape. You trap some, you kill some, you keep that population lower. Now the elk spread out a little more than they were. They're in regions where the feed is a little bit better. They get healthier. They can survive hard winters better than they could before.
Yep, birth rates go up on calves.
Everything. So they have an impact. Putting the wolves there has an impact, and it has a real monetary one in the sense that you're going to need to replace all of this lost meat that you were getting through hunting. You're going to need to replace it with something else.
Tofu.
Whether it's chicken, tofu, beans, it doesn't matter.
No, it doesn't.
There is some food loss that has to be backfilled. The question is, do you want to? Like, do you need to?
Or can you? I think that's a lot of it is, can you?
I mean, what if, I know this is going to sound crazy, but what if you decided, we're going to manage wolves, so we still have quite a few on the landscape, but not so many that they drastically decrease the harvest rate for hunters.
Yeah.
Right? So you have a little bit of best of both worlds. And we're going to manage wolves at a level that maximizes both options for both wolves and humans and so on. Now you're looking at a much better, I think, use of what we have on the planet here for all involved, including the wolves. And so the other part that we didn't cover is just when a state loses 50% of its herds,
right?
That's a 50% reduction in tag allocations.
Exactly.
When the birth rates are a lot lower than they were, you can't issue as many tags. You don't replace the crop each year with a fresh batch of fawns and calves because half of them get eaten by wolves if they didn't get eaten by four, or grizzly bear.
Right.
We could throw them in here as much as we throw wolves in here. When that happens, you significantly reduce the herd sizes. Now you have to issue fewer tags. And how much is hunting as an industry for like the state of Idaho?
So for the state of Idaho, it says big game hunting, angling, and wildlife viewing, all as a whole brought in, and this is in 2000. This is a report from 2024. I think it goes back to 2011, but it brought in $2.1 billion annually.
Okay. That's not all. There's fishing in there too, but
yeah, so it has,
but still you're talking about billions.
Yep.
We're in the billions here. Yep. And I would argue, that's a lot of money.
It's a lot.
So we're looking at billions, and there's a true cost to that as it's getting harder to get a tag, tag allocations drop, and so on. So my argument around the wolf situation in the outdoors and hunting is not that we shouldn't have them. It's that we should manage them.
Exactly.
In a way that helps the entire ecosystem, and that includes human beings. We are part of it.
Right.
You could pretend otherwise, but we just are.
We have, exactly. We are.
And by enabling hunters to go out and manage through tag allocations and legal methods of take to go out and trap and harvest wolves, you're ensuring that these populations can be bigger, healthier, stronger, and allow that human consumption to remain where it's at.
Right.
Then, therefore, keep the need for some monoculture soybean crop or some sort of vast acreage takeover for more chickens or cattle or sheep or something to backfill that protein need.
Right.
You can actually maximize the resource by managing it well. That's all we're asking for.
Yeah.
That's all we're saying is let's manage the wolf population so that we can get the most value out of it.
Right.
In a real world
sense. They're going to be here, so instead of just taking 100% loss, there's going to be some loss.
Offset it.
Let's offset it with some economic value as well. That's tag holders purchasing tags. That is trappers.
It's pretty basic.
Basic.
And not too long ago, I heard Cliff Gray, love Cliff, and he was on the Joe Rogan podcast, and he was talking about there's wolf. A lot of these pro-wolf organizations are straight up propaganda machines. They really don't care about, they really aren't informed, or they actually are informed. They're just misleading. They prey on people's emotions.
Right.
So they tell you the wolf is extinct, that hunters are cruelly killing them and so forth. You need to save them. None of that's true. It's just out and out lies, pushing an agenda to protect them. Same with grizzly bears. And what we want to do is sort of educate and change the culture around that. Let people understand that there's more to it than what they're trying to push. But Cliff was talking to Joe about this, and he said Joe was commenting on a video that was really compelling, that was mostly propaganda and he played that video. Yep. And Clay was rebutting the video, and he was saying, Joe, I think it was in Colorado. He's using Colorado as the example, because it was about bringing wolves in. One of the things that he was saying was, these elk, they can't cross the highway anymore. They're up against a hard wall. They can't just, it's not like 300 years ago where they could just go places.
Right.
They're stuck. They got these barriers, that highways and real world, modern era landscapes that you can't just pretend don't exist.
Right.
And now you're going to put wolves in there. And it's like, throw the sheep to the wolves kind of scenario, where if you don't understand what's going to happen when those wolves come in, and these elk and deer and stuff just can't maneuver and go places like they were, and you want to make it so that hunters can't hunt these things,
right?
You're going to have it's a real world, modern day problem that you want to pretend doesn't exist, but does.
But it actually has a huge impact.
Yeah, you're going to just wipe out a lot of animals, a lot of deer and elk, and then you're going to try for years to try to bring those populations back. But you're going to have to beat back the wolf population to do it.
Right.
And that's kind of one of the subjects that they covered. The other part was this, he was talking about the trophic cascade, and they said in this video that despite all the management efforts, all the hunting and so forth that happened in Yellowstone, without this magic ingredient of wolves, the park was going downhill. It was all the willows and aspens were dying off, and
the elk were overpopulating.
And there was all this bad wetlands issues and all this stuff. And Clay was like, look, they say despite all these efforts, there were no other efforts.
None.
They just put these elk in this park with no predators, including humans. They didn't allow any hunting in the park at all. And so it's a lie. And it's also a lie to act like wolves are some magic ingredient that sort of does this magic thing to help the environment be better. I think some wolves definitely are needed. There's things that happens when wolves get on the landscape, the coyotes disappear.
Right.
When the coyotes disappear, you have more foxes.
Yeah.
And when you have more foxes, you there is like this little balance that's achieved. There's no doubt that wolves impact the space for sure, but do you need to allow them free reign?
Yeah.
Or do you trap them, manage them, try to push up some of those populations? Do you allow hunting for elk to some extent and deer, so that human beings can then leverage a little bit of that?
As management side of things too, is certain areas can handle more wolves in that area, can handle more elk in the area, and other areas, because of other animals that are there, it can't handle it. So you got to manage those numbers and keep them down, and wolves are no different.
Yeah. I think it's just one of those things where we got to think about it a little bit more, present our case a little more often. Just I think people need to be more aware of the cost of wolves. That's it. Like, okay, yes, let's have them here, but let's also talk about what that means.
Right.
And then, are you willing to pay that price? And most people are like, no, that's, I agree with you. I don't want to put small ranchers out of business, and having tons of wolves over here is fine, just maybe not in this region here. And I think hunting is probably a good idea so that we can, still have wolves, but also do this and this and this. I also think that us as hunters showcasing a little more of what wolves do reduces the overwhelming sympathy that people have for wolves. Exactly. When all they see are cute, cuddly wolves and they never see them eating the ass out of a dying moose, it's like, oh, while it's still alive, all of a sudden they're like, I don't have as much sympathy for the wolf as I did, before I saw that.
Like when you see and have firsthand experience with those experiences, like, I mean, I've came up on 2 elk, a cow and a spike, that are still alive, standing there in shock, a little gruesome, like the cow, his intestines and stuff are wrapped around a piece of sagebrush. He's still alive with his nose, his rear end, and his guts kind of chewed on and eaten, still alive. They just ate the delicacies and gone. And so it's like, that is hard to see, even as a hunter, as anybody, it's very, very hard to see. And they don't see that. That is not portrayed on the anti-hunting side of things. You don't see that. It's not shown, I guess.
Yeah. And that's where it helps for us to tell that story a little more.
Right.
A little more. So that's it. It's not a long discussion. Mm-mm. It's just it's kind of
you could research numbers in Yellowstone and stuff, what they were in 1987 up to 1993 before wolves were introduced.
Yeah, honestly, we've gone down that rabbit hole now and then and done vast levels of research, and it's kind of funny. It's like I want a return of common sense. Yeah, if we just have a whole bunch of wolves and never hunt them, right? This is the result. Yes, it will reach an equilibrium, where there's not very much available anymore,
right?
For
correct
human consumption.
And at the end of that, your wolves start to die off too because the food source is not there for them.
And it's not like your grandpa's elk herds where they could where there was no highway hemming them in and no city landscape.
Look at all the houses that have taken over winter ranges.
If you looked at the Serengeti and you see like the wildebeest moving, half the part of how they survive is they're on the move so much that the lions
can't keep up.
Right. Well, if you were to take that entire herd and then like make it so they could only go like 5 miles, and then you don't hunt the lions, it's just we live in a new world. The reality of it is different than what it used to be. Mm-hmm. Anyway, hope you guys got something out of this. Let us know in the comment section below on our YouTube channel. We try to respond there. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll catch you on the next episode. Stay gritty.